Well, that was a very pleasant 6-minute watch, I have to say. Solely irons, and I imagine that was deliberate. Don't know whether that's denoting a note of caution when you play. Long stuff isn't going so well, I'm presuming. I don't know, but I doubt it is that. I think it's probably just what you happen to be using at the time. So anyway, we'll get to this little partial swing, which I'm zeroing in on for the moment, but probably this partial swing and then a slightly bolder one, from what I can tell. Just a couple of comments on that, because it's one of the few things that sticks out. I think overall, just before we get into it, I just love the sort of matter-of-factness, the way you're going about your thing. There's a little pregnant pause there before you take each shot, which many a player is sort of guilty of. I never can quite figure out whether that's a really good or really not so good thing, but probably somewhere in between. Matteo Manassaro, it was like when you were videoing him, you thought something had gone wrong with the camera and time had frozen. He just sort of stands there doing nothing. I always think maybe that's a sign that somebody's thinking too much if there's too obvious a pause. But, it could also be just, gathering your thoughts and zeroing them in on the shot at hand and just sort of imagining what it's going to feel like to hit that shot. So, it can be a wholly good thing, it can be possibly not such a positive thing. But anyway, enough on that. But yeah, I just like the overall flow, the way you were going about your golf. You don't look like you're trying too hard. Maybe sometimes your tempos are influenced by being outside and not playing at your favourite pace. But, controlling the arc of your swing there, it sounded like each and every shot was pretty solidly struck, and I'm sure we'll come to it, but the 5-iron you hit, the last 5-iron you hit, I heard you sort of yelp in disapproval, perhaps. It sounded a bit like that. I think I know your noises pretty well. And yet the shot ended up about 4 yards to the left of the target. So the path numbers that I can see look very, very stable. So I'm sort of thinking that, in respect of swing path and stuff like that, we're doing pretty nicely indeed. To the point, coach. Let's get to the point. You know me, sometimes takes a while, but I just feel like I'm going to highlight one simple thing. I really like your posture, really like your setup. We know it's a partial swing. Gripping down prodigiously, I have to say, which might make the head feel quite light. I would be slightly personally disconcerted by that, but that's just a very personal thing. You can hold the club wherever you like, providing you and the club head, the weight of the club head, have a rapport. I like the sort of pseudo verticalness of the way the club goes back. You can sort of see something I advocated, I think, when we went to San Roque. Quite directly up. I like that because it just stops the club sort of moving outwards too much, from into out too much, which would cause a propensity to maybe stick the heel into the hosel into the ball, which when the club's moving predominantly up and down, it's not moving outwards, which I think is a good thing. What I would highlight, and I'll see if I can find some footage to corroborate this, but halfway back, I prefer to see the palm of your right hand on top of the shaft for these partial shots, but that does present a little issue with inflection of the wrists, where it can feel like the longest backswing you could make keeping your right hand on top of the shaft is a little brief, and you can clearly see you're going quite way past that. The elbows separate quite a bit, we sort of, the rate of opening, which would precipitate perhaps a necessity to close the face, would be how I'd describe the feeling of it. It's not outrageous. I mean, it would be pretty shameful if at this point we'd been working hard when we get the opportunity on your swing, and that there are things that are categorically wrong. Not a lot of space there though, bud. Body, hips not very open. Not a massive amount of rotation has gone on at this point in the forward swing, and a lot of it happens sort of almost after the fact. So I would advocate palm more on top of the shaft, halfway back. I'll explain why when I'm in front of camera. And a little bit more rotation on these forward swings. And I'll come up with a suggestion that you can try, because I think I'm going to invest in a new toy that I've been after for a while. I think when I contemplate it, I think it delivers too much for me not to invest. So yeah, just ends up looking a little bit flicky as a result of maybe slightly under rotating for this type of shot. So those are my criticisms. Otherwise, lovely. Again, loving the pace at which you go about your work. I think this was a slightly fuller swing, this one. Again, the sort of routine that you go through. We see a rehearsal swing there. Again, a sort of continuity there with the sort of not a massive amount of rotation. It hasn't got to be, kind of prodigious, but at the same time, perhaps a little bit more space there afforded you. Club and hands and arms not so tightly tucked into the thighs. I don't know whether it was intentional. The face looks maybe a wee bit open there, which again would be consistent with some of the difficulties we have sometimes with mishits and misdirected shots. So, yeah, perhaps, actually in the end, a similar size swing. I'm probably imagining it as I'm watching it in real time, probably imagining that this was slightly, this shot distance, actually now I'm looking at it, it's the same shot distance. Not sure if it's the same exact shot. Might have fouled up here and loaded up the same image twice, but I'm going to soldier on manfully. I'll come back to that. I'll have to edit that in, see if I can find that fuller shot that I was referring to. Oh dear, dear, dear. Good job I'm paying attention in Class A. Let's skip to the 5-iron. All right, there's a couple of keynotes there, so I'm gonna rattle on through without chopping this up too much and looking at that fuller partial shot, because I think you'll get the point that I'm making. What I'm saying is you can play a lot of these 40-yard, close to the hole, diddy little pitches, chips even you might call them. But when you go up above sort of circa 40 yards, I think you've got to start contemplating the fact that the technique can't quite be exactly the same. There has to be some credence to the way the wrists and the forearms work in the swing. But I think I want to relate that to you, because if we do use this 5-iron, which we know ended up just a mere 4 yards to the left of target, if we use this as a stock good shot, we can look at the path numbers there. I think they were within a degree of desirable. Let's use the old trusty ideal biomechanical plane line. And maybe we see, I like the palm being a bit more on top there, perhaps. But again, we'll reflect on the alarms going off as all right. I like the club staying outside the hands, arriving a little bit under the ideal biomechanical plane, but I think still suitably balanced. Right leg not too stiff and straight. Little bit of separation between the elbows. Again, shoulder rotation maybe a little bit flat. So that's something I'll touch on when it comes to what you might, have a little dalliance into to see if you get some value. Decent impact conditions as always. Whoopsie, goodness me, my finger button pressing isn't as desirable as I'd like. So there's our frame of success. Decent bit of left leg, decent bit of glutes, bit of flexion in the right arm, elbow and hip quite close together. Now on the exit, the only other thing I think probably pertinent, how the left elbow exits. Kind of wants to fall, but again, the separation of the upper arm from the side is just to allow you this lovely willowy long finish, which is when you're building up pressure. Very necessary, very McElroy, very Adam Scott. We like it. But yeah, as you say, starved a little bit of the front on angle to tell whether maybe the elbow is sort of pulling backwards and upwards rather than just continuously and evenly folding and sort of heading out to its full length as a consequence of constant and even rotation. So not too bad, mate. Overall, good in the hood, you'd have to say. Setup looks good. Maybe a hint that the centre of gravity is a little bit far out beyond the knees. So legs a little bit, a whiff of straightness there. You'd probably like to see your centre of gravity a little bit more, to stand a little taller, a little bit more knee flex correspondingly to sort of give you that optimum dynamism. So you've got maximum mobility and stability. Those are the notes, mate. I will get outside and put those into a little bit of a visual set of homework points for you to do when and if you get a chance to play when you've not got life duties. Okay, my dear chap, cut to me outdoors. Once more with feeling. Yes, so as per, I've fabricated something here, you'll probably be able to tell. This is an alignment pole lashed to the handle of a 56-degree sand wedge with primitively with some insulation tape. You can buy like extensions, which is the coaching aid I was, learning aid should I say, which I'm keen on, which just sort of plugs onto the end, and I need it to be portable obviously because I'm dashing around everywhere. So yeah, I'm going to look that up again and reinvest. Now we'll use the homespun one for the time being, Ed. But yeah, down the line, I think we'll start with the idea that halfway back, right palm ends up a little bit on the side of the handle, thus. So we take the club back, palm ends up on the side, or sort of erring towards the side, which suggests the forearms are rotating quite a lot at a point in the backswing where you wouldn't really expect to see quite that much rotation. If we can see you with your palm a little bit more on top, I think also this might precipitate a little bit of a steeper shoulder rotation. You'll feel that your right arm will stack more on top rather than want to sort of wander around behind and that elbow poke out. So if we can start the initial part of that backswing and feel like the palm of the right hand is sitting a little bit more on top of the handle. Don't necessarily have to work too hard to feel like the face is looking down, but just keep the palm on top, all right? And that will ensure that the rate of opening and closure is a little bit more kind of in keeping with the momentum of your swing. And as much as anything, if that right palm moves onto the side, especially for those little diddy shots where the club's about hip height and we don't really want to have to, you know, recover and forward rotate too aggressively because that could lead to inconsistencies which we could otherwise avoid. So I think, again, I like handle high. I like the club head moving directly back. I like your right palm more on top. There's very little that's gone on there in the backswing that won't need sort of recovering. All we got to do is then make sure we rotate through. So the rotation through, that's where this little Herbert comes in. If you don't, if you get flicky, this will whack you in the side and give you some tangible feedback, shall we say. So if your rotation stalls and your hands keep going, you'll feel this pole whacking you in the left side, and that's what it looks like from the front on perspective. So it will encourage you, once you've got that half backswing, maybe club to about hip height, I'll talk about what I was referring to when it comes to the continuation of that. All right. I like handle high for chipping. I like thumbs down for chipping. A bit of a Joseph May disciple, I'll admit. Like the way he conveys it, like the way he's put into words a lot of the things I've always thought and felt are a good idea. So kindred spirits, you might say. So that sort of halfway back little chip from the edge of the green. If we don't rotate and we start getting flicky, we risk sort of the altitude of our club changing unwittingly. We certainly don't want your swing moving downwards, and that rotation helps keep the swing away from the earth on the way through. And we might catch them a hair thin, but I think that's preferable to leaving it a yard in front of you, Ed, let's just say. So palm on top on the way back, more rotation on the way forwards. Get yourself an alignment pole lashed to your 56, stick it down on the mat at home, and just practice the feeling of keeping out of the way, if you like clearing, opening your body. So from down the line, we're going to see more glutes, even on a tiny little shot like this. But if that club hasn't opened up and is squarer, then when we rotate through, the path and face are going to be doing almost the identical thing. And the altitude of your swing, we don't want your swing moving towards the ground. That's death. In chipping, we want to keep out of the way of the ground and control the altitude of our shots, which is why I was so pleased and impressed with the way you were otherwise controlling the altitude of your swing, because of all the hard work we've done replicating these things. But I think in the pitching, chipping, sometimes maybe it gets a little bit understated because it's a small shot. I think there are certain things that could be emphasized, and that being one of them, the rotation in your forward swing. Okay, so maybe I'm going to grab another club. I'm on these Bryson DeChambeau Monster Thick grips these days, by the way. I don't know whether, I don't think we've seen each other since I've installed these, but I'm loving it. question for you. Why is it that thick grips inhibit wrist motion in a golf swing, but they don't inhibit wrist motion in a tennis serve or with a cricket bat? Interesting, huh? How I'm just throwing that one around to some of my closest advocates. I'm just asking, why is it, if you want to create maximum racket speed, that a thick handle doesn't slow that or inhibit that, but it does with a golf club? Just saying, okay? You may have a take on that, and I'd like to hear it. But yeah, a little bit controversial. When it comes to your starting position, maybe a little bit stooped, that sort of back of your armpits, centre of gravity type thing, a little bit out beyond your knees, legs get a little bit straight, that sort of inhibits rotation a wee bit, and we don't really want that. So a little bit taller, a little bit more knee flex, so that we get the centre of gravity vertically above the kneecaps, something like this. Not a point, I think, that we haven't made before. Thought I'd mention it. So just coming on from that idea that if your handle's high and your thumbs are down, this kind of inflection, I believe they call ulnar inflection, if that stays, you won't complete your backswing. So at some point we have to get into this radial inflection, this way. Wrist hinge, you might call it. So more emphatic palm on top on the way back. What I quite like is how that will potentially lead to a slightly more appropriate pivot angle. Shoulders get a little bit flat sometimes, you know, you end up with quite a flat shoulder position, and I think when the club's going across you, that's why we get the club a little bit under the plane, as we noticed on the video a minute ago. It just gets a little bit under. It's not irretrievable, of course, and it's probably not a terrible thing if you're trying to deliver the club from quite deep and be predominantly into out. So it's probably the byproduct of emphasis on other things. But if we think about the pivotal, a perfect pivot on a vertical spine would see my shoulders pivot horizontally. So if I'm standing straight up, then when I pivot, my shoulders will do it on a horizontal plane. If my spine angle is thus, when I pivot, I should see more of an angle. I shouldn't see too flat a shoulder position. And I think, again, when the palm starts its way onto the side of the handle and staying a bit more on top, when it's more on top, we should see the angle get a little bit steeper and get the club a little bit even more on plane and even more balanced, which wouldn't be no bad thing. I'm nitpicking a little bit, to be honest, mate. It's not like it's terrible. I'm just saying that I know you like to stay on point. We don't want to drift too far away from the ideal. But halfway back, if the palm was more on top, slightly more steep shoulder rotation, and when we finish, we just don't want this separation. So I think this sort of starts here, but then you're in league with the Jack Nicklauses and the Rory McIlroys of this world, who are accused of that elbow going a bit backwards and flying out a little bit. All right, I don't think you need it. I think you've got flexibility enough to contend with your forearms staying the same distance apart, which of course stabilizes the club. And in this plane, if you've been watching Marucci recently, Speed Golf Rob, then you'll know that this up and down is an obsession of his, and it's very much integrated into your golf swing. So you'll swing the club back and keep these forearms sort of together, and that stabilizes the club. That gathers, you know, that keeps the club moving in that path that it's moving on. If this goes away, you get issues which you've got to kind of somehow work around, which is just, again, it's not exact checks and balances all the time. Sometimes you get out of position and can happily get back into position on the way forwards, having strayed. But on the way back, again, keeping those forearms close together might just be as simple as the job of keeping the palm on top, the shoulder rotation a little bit more steep, you'll feel it, all right? And then just keeping this elbow pressing inwards that way. Now that's actually technically external rotation, but this way, pressing towards the other arm, and we just get a nice, neat sort of, you know, vibe there where things are contained, shall we say. Okay, easily enough for now. You can pick the bones out of that at your leisure and go back and watch it. So I'm conscious I delivered it quite quickly, but at the same time, yeah, you get to rewind. So I've got no concerns that you can't sort of pick the bones out of that at intervals and, you know, work on chasing one rabbit at a time. Speaking of rabbits, I better feed them. Catch you later.